Hi everyone, welcome to the In the Frame podcast, your premier place to come hear all things filmmaking as we interview wonderful industry professionals. I'm Luke, I'm joined as always by Pip, and today we're with the lovely Claire. How are you, Claire?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Good
Amazing.
to be here.
It's lovely to have you on the podcast, lovely to have you here. Do remember, if you want to learn more about OSBD, you can go to www.osbd.org, not .com, .org. And let's get straight into it.
Well, Claire, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us and taking part in this. I really appreciate that. Why don't you just to begin with, just tell us a little bit about your background, what you've been working on these past several years, and also how you got into TV.
Okay, so at the moment I'm working as a drama producer and exec, but it's been a bit of an unusual route to get here. Usually people that work in drama as producers have either come one of two routes. One is through development, which is working on scripts and working with writers and coming up the script editing side. And the other is working as a coordinator, production manager, line producer coming through the production side. I started off my career as a journalist. So I was working in radio all the way through university for Radio 4th in Edinburgh and then for Central FM in Stirling. And I thought that being a journalist and writer was what I wanted to be, until I started getting sent out on stories where I felt like I couldn't remove myself from the story. So doorstepping the parents of children who had died in car crashes and things like that. And I got to the point where I just thought, I'm really not cut out to be a journalist. I can't kind of separate myself from the story and get the necessary detachment. And so my first job was at Granada Television, but all of my radio journalism and writing experience kind of came in really useful. So the job was making trailers for TV programs. And I must admit that at the time I went for the interview, I kind of thought, 30 seconds for a trailer, how hard can it be? What I didn't know at the time was that the making trailers for Granada at that point was pretty much their version of the BBC production trainee scheme. So you had to do everything. You had to learn how to write, how to direct, how to commission graphics, how to cast, how to go out and search for locations for things, because quite often, if you were doing something for a program that was really early in its development or it was still in production, you wouldn't have any material. So you'd have to go out and shoot something instead. So, somebody could say to me, oh, we need something on the TV tomorrow. And you'd have to go out and shoot something that afternoon. You'd have to set it up really quickly. So the very first thing I made when I was at Granada Studios was an advert for Granada Studio Tour, which was, at the time, they had like a backlot of all the sets that they'd had for things like Sherlock Holmes and Coronation Street, things like that. So I had to go and shoot an advert for them for a Granada Studios tour, which was a great introduction. And as part of that, I got to talk to the DP, who was a guy called David Odd, who filmed lots of big Granada dramas. He filmed Sherlock Holmes and he filmed, the really big things that they were making for Granada, and he taught me so much about kind of directing and about camera, so it was kind of real baptism of fire, but great training at the same time. And then we had to kind of figure out scripting and everything like that, so we were kind of making trailers on a regular basis and becoming part of the production community at Granada. So you were getting to know the producers and the directors and everybody else. So it was a great insight into not only production, but also how to network, how to make yourself memorable to other people that then might take you on to work on other jobs, and how to make connections with people that would last for the rest of your life. And later on in my career, I worked on Shameless as an executive producer. And on my first day, I walked into the production office, and the woman who was there, who was working as the line producer, was somebody that I'd worked with at Granada 20 years ago. So you just carry on meeting these people all the way through your life. I worked at Granada for a couple of years, decided that actually I wanted to develop my writing skills more, and went and did an MA in creative writing. And then after I'd finished that, I realized that I couldn't support myself as a writer straight away. So I had to try and combine it with production at the same time. So I carried on as a freelance, producing and directing trailers during the week, reading scripts at night as a script reader, going home all weekend and writing script reports, and doing that for about 18 months until I got work as a script reader and a kind of trainee script editor in-house at a company called Red Rooster. And they were making TV programs and films. So I kind of had to do my writing in my own time and develop my skills in drama development, which was great. I kind of felt like the production bug had hit me, but I'd got properly into drama at that point. And I tried to combine the two things, writing and production, and then realized that although I thought I wanted to be a writer, if I sat in a room on my own for the rest of my life, I probably would go mad, because I'd kind of been bitten by the production bug at the same time. You know, that feeling of, you know, you have to go out and shoot something tomorrow, and kind of seeing how dramas were put together and how they were developed just made me think, well, actually, the production side is probably more right for me. I still get to work on stories. I still get to develop stories and work with writers, but I have that sense of community and working with people and getting things done and getting things made. I think I always thrived on the adrenaline of that a little bit. So I made a very conscious decision at that point to leave my thoughts of being a writer behind and to move on into drama development. And I worked in drama development for lots of years after that, moving through different companies. So from Red Rooster, I went to Alibi Film and TV, and then to Ecos Film and TV, and eventually ended up being head of development at Impossible Pictures, where when I first went to work there, we had one thing on the development slate that they had in development with ITV, and within about a year, I think we had 10, one of which was Primeval. So I got to know quite a lot about dinosaurs.
Great program.
Yeah.
You know, at OSBD, we like dinosaurs here. Or at least I like
do.
dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, I grew up watching so much sci-fi and Doctor Who and things like that. So, you know, my English teacher would be saying to me, you really must read Jane Austen. And I'm like, really? Okay.
No, dinosaurs. Yes.
Rather than watching Doctor Who and looking at dinosaurs. Yeah. So, but I remember one day when I was working at Impossible Pictures, my husband phoned me up and he said, so how's your day been? And I said, well, I spent this morning talking about dinosaurs and about a dinosaur that had a dinosaur worm that had 11 different sexes, which I can't quite get my head around how anything could be 11 different sexes. And then I talked about yetis for a film that we were working on. And then I talked about singing nuns for a musical that we had in production. And he just went, your job is just so not real. But it's so varied. Literally, you can be carrying lots of different stories in your head. So any drama development, any drama company usually has a slate of projects in development, and you can be working across all of those at the same time. So yeah, everything from singing dancing nuns to yetis and dinosaurs. And we made a show for ITV called Pickles, the dog who won the World Cup, which had a talking dog and singing ferrets and more 1966 World Cup football than I ever want to see again in my life. But it was good fun. It was good fun. This is me rambling. Is this okay?
No, this is great. Just before Luke pitches in with a question, I wanted to just clarify something really quick, because I think it's a very important kind of take-home message, really, and that is that how long was it from that initial, you know, kind of thinking you're going to be one thing, going and trying a bunch of different things, to the point where you felt, oh, kind of, yeah, I've landed in the role that I feel this is the role for me within the industry?
It was quite a while, and like I say, it was an unusual route. Most people go very defined routes into doing the job that I'm doing, and I kind of wandered around and had to kind of find out what I wanted to do. To think about wanting to do one thing and then to divert was quite difficult, and I find myself having to take several backward steps at one point. So what I didn't mention in between all that was before I went into drama, I was actually working at Children's ITV for a while as well, kind of running their trailer and production department. And it was a very nice, very well-paid managerial job that at the time paid more than my dad was earning. And when I decided to leave that, because I always thought that telling stories in some way was what I wanted to do. And I thought that being in children's TV might lead me into entertainment or, you know, studio-based programs, which wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I decided that I would step back and go freelance and do the kind of script development and teach myself how to be a script reader. And my dad kind of said, "You're absolutely mad. You know, you're earning a good living. Why would you want to be freelance and have that uncertainty of how you know, whether you're going to earn a living or not?" But I think if there is something that you know is not quite right, if you're able to, it's nice to be able to take a sideways step.
Yeah.
And I always think that, you know, although it seems like I've had lots of disparate experience, which a lot of people in my job don't necessarily have, it also feels like nothing is ever wasted. So when I was making trailers, I had to shoot and edit my own stuff, which has given me a good insight and background to how directors and how editors work. You know, so when I'm sitting in an edit suite now as a drama producer or an exec, you know, I can have conversations about, you know, can we take that a few frames back, or, you know, can we, you know, cut to the halfway through the move, or, you know, things like that, things where you kind of develop a language. And so I do feel like none of that experience has been wasted, although I kind of wandered around. And I think you have to be prepared sometimes to backtrack and take a slightly different route. And quite often I think if I could give myself advice now from when I was in my 20s, part of that advice would be, don't worry too much about feeling that you have to stick in one job or you have to go one way, because there might be lots of different routes to the thing that you want to do. And along the way, you can kind of find out what your strengths are. My strength was not sitting in a room on my own. My strength was being able to bounce ideas off other people and still get excited about stories and develop them with other people rather than just having to sit and work on my own all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. I just love hearing your story and how you kind of discovered what you wanted to do. Because I think that's something that really gets overshadowed a lot, is the fact that you can go into the industry thinking you want to do one thing, but then really discover that there's something else that you're really better at doing. And so
and I think it's also because people don't always know about all the jobs that are available in the industry. You know, when I'm working on something at the moment now, a young adult drama that's in development for Apple TV. I'm working with an American company called Lionsgate. And as part of that, you know, I'm involved in working with the writer and developing the storytelling, but I'm also, you know, figuring out where we're going to shoot in the world. So talking to location managers in New Zealand and Romania and Canada and Norway. But as part of that, I've also had to find out a lot more than I already knew about VFX. And I felt like I knew quite a lot from things like Primeval, you know, making dinosaurs happen on screen. I felt like I knew quite a lot. But when you go and talk to people, you find out a whole host of jobs that you never knew existed in VFX. Or when I went to talk to somebody from Framestore who was working on his Dark Materials, and I was talking to him at the studio in Cardiff, he was giving me a tour around the set, and you can kind of see the designers working on the set and the level of detail. You know, I didn't even know any of these jobs existed. You know, nobody in my family worked in TV, to the point when my dad, when I was 14 and told him that I wanted to work in TV, he actually sat me down and said, people like us don't work in TV, love. You know, to him it was more believable that I might become a doctor. And in fact, every time I came home from university, I was studying English and film. Every time I came home from university, he said, it's not too late, you can still be a doctor. And I'm like, I think it might be too late to go that route. But he just thought that, you know, unless you were from a certain class or you had a certain amount of money, or when I started in drama, you know, daddy runs the company, you know, that it just wasn't believable. So I did have to do a lot of making my own contacts. And even at university, you know, working as a journalist, trying to pay my way through university that way, that kind of came about as a happy accident from having done work experience, but trying to make yourself indispensable. Trying to get to the point where people think, oh, they are offering something to us that we didn't even know we needed, you know, and then they remember you. And I say that to other people. I do some mentoring for an educational charity called Villiers Park, which is kind of helping people into their first careers from backgrounds that might be kind of outside where those jobs normally take people from. And one of my mentees came in to work at one of the companies. I helped kind of get her some work experience. But once she got in there, she really made herself memorable, to the point that when somebody else in the company in a few months' time kind of said, that person's going off on holiday for a little while and we need somebody to fill in, that girl that came in from work experience, she was really fantastic. Do you think she might want some paid work? Shall we get her back? You know, so once she came in, she kind of made herself memorable, and people value that. You know, if you come in and you're full of ideas and you're full of enthusiasm, people think you've got something to offer.
Incredible. Talking about you working in TV, a lot of young people aspire to kind of make it into TV, and I know from my experience, coming from a non-traditional background of kind of not going to university, that kind of stuff, it can be really hard sometimes to find the right in with TV. What would you recommend to young people who really want to get in a TV company?
I would recommend trying to make contacts as much as you can. You know, whether that is going to events where you hear people speak and asking them questions, if you can, as part of the audience, and then trying to talk to them afterwards.
Yeah.
Some people do that. I think that's quite smart. Quite often in kind of working my way up, if I'd kind of identified where I thought I might want to go next or what I might need to do next, I tried to talk to somebody who was doing that job or that role, and quite often just said, I'd really love to pick your brains, kind of take you out for a cup of coffee and a piece of cake, and kind of ask you how I do this next. And kind of either they gave really good advice or they said, I can introduce you to so and so. When I first started in the job, I had no contacts at all, nobody that worked in the industry. In my very first job at Granada, I was extremely lucky because I just answered a job that was in the paper. And quite often that doesn't even happen these days. You know, it was a job that was in the Guardian on a Monday, which used to have a media section. So that route kind of feels a bit less possible nowadays. But I would say, show that you either have some experience or you have the real interest. Try and make as many personal contacts with people as possible, or find out if there's anybody who knows anybody, and you can kind of do it that way. Ask for advice, always be nice, always be polite, try and make yourself memorable. And once you've made a connection, follow up with them, not to the point where you kind of make yourself a pain in the backside, but you know, I quite often say to people, you know, drop me a line every once in a while, just let me know how you're getting on. Because it's great to either hear what they've been doing and how they've developed, or it's nice to kind of be reminded. You know, I might be working on something thinking, oh, I'm kind of thinking that I might need somebody to do this job. If somebody drops me a line and says, remember me, we had a cup of coffee, and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should go and talk to that person again. You know, so it just kind of keeps you in their head, I guess. But yeah, this is very much a people business, especially in drama, where quite often you're selling ideas, you know, and talking to commissioners and things like that. People buy from people, you know, people work with people that they find nice to work with.
Very true.
So, yeah, try and make good contacts, and be nice to everybody. You never know where they're going to be next.
Following on from that, Claire, do you think, because Luke mentioned, you know, he didn't go the kind of the university route, and obviously there is an obvious route there to go into higher education. There's, you know, plethora of different types of courses nowadays, like loads, some of them really quite specialist. You know, if people perhaps do have quite a clear idea of what they want to be. But for those that don't go that kind of, let's say, a slightly more traditional route doing that, and all of the things that you say are absolutely, you know, spot on. But do you also think that they need to be creating things, making things, even if they're not the central collaborator, you know, the writer, the director, the producer, the cinematographer, but even if they're just going along and being part of that process, that they're seen to be active, doing things, making things? Is that something that would be important to you to see?
Yeah, I think always being able to show that you've actually done something or are doing something, or that you're finding out by doing it, is all really useful. I mean, when I was first at university, the course that I did was English and film, but it was very theoretical at the time. we had to, if we wanted practical experience, we had to go out and kind of do it ourselves. And at every stage where I've also been kind of looking at what I wanted to do next, it made a massive difference if I'd already been able to prove that I'd done it somehow. So even though I was kind of working in some of these areas, I was doing things in my spare time or doing things that, you know, I felt would help to get me to the next stage, you know, making short films, doing things like that where you have to learn so quickly and learn on the job and make connections with people. You know, when I was doing it, I was working on other people's short films as well. You know, I've been a boom operator, I've been, you know, helping sorting out costumes, I've been a runner, I've been a driver, I've been all kinds of things on other people's films as well. So I think, yes, being able to show that you can do something, or that you have some experience, even if it's kind of in a kind of trainee or development role, is really useful. And it's also useful to figure out what and how you want to do things as well. At a point at which I was thinking that I wanted to produce rather than just work in drama development with scripts in an office, I knew it was extremely unlikely that I would get a gig as a producer straight away within a TV company, because the stakes are so high, it costs so much to make drama. It wasn't likely that somebody was going to trust me as a trainee producer with no experience whatsoever. So I went out and made short films as a producer, because for myself, I wanted to see whether I enjoyed that too. You know, do I want to be a producer? I should probably produce something and find out whether I actually even enjoy that. So yeah, and when I did that, it made a massive difference to how people saw me as well. They're kind of going, oh, so you want to be a producer? Oh, and you've produced some things already in your own time. That was incredibly useful. So yes, go out. If you have a group of friends, make a film, you know, even if you shoot things on your phone these days, or, you know, there's a group of people that have made a feature film on Zoom in lockdown. They made a horror film. You know, they got together as a group of people, as an ensemble of people, and went and made something. So they wanted to prove that they could do it. I think it's really useful.
Yeah, great answer.
Luke? Yeah, if I could throw in a question that wasn't on our list. There is I'm currently really fascinated with where the internet's going and where digital creation online's going, as well as all the news around Stagecraft and The Mandalorian and those digital sets coming together. I was wondering, from your perspective in TV drama, what's your opinion on where the digital content and kind of filmmaking is going in the future? Is it sticking strictly to television, or is it starting to bleed out, and is it starting to really encompass a lot more than we once thought it did?
Do you mean, is non-linear TV going to be the way forward? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm curious to know what you think, coming from a TV background. What you think about digital content and kind of the rise of things like live streaming and content online on YouTube and Instagram and TikToks and stuff like that. I'm just curious, from your traditional background, what you think of where it's going.
I mean, to me, all of those feel like platforms, and they just feel like different ways of broadcasting. So when people talk about digital and they talk about digital content, I always think, well, what does that mean? Because to me, it's still, if it's drama, it's still a story, right? You know, so you still need storytelling skills, and you still need to be able to develop the story and find a way to put it together. So whichever platform that goes out on, I think it nowadays is kind of as valid as anywhere else. And the only difference is either how big your audience is or how much money you've had to put into it, you know, depending on whether you're supported by a broadcaster or not. I think people are watching things in lots of different places these days. You know, I used to see it with my my stepkids, my teenagers. You know, the TV would be on, but they'd be watching something on their computer at the same time. You know, they'd have the headphones in one ear and they'd have their phone going in the background. You know, people are watching things on lots of screens of different sizes. I think that does give more opportunities, because there are more spaces for people to show things. I do think there is probably quite a big danger of public service broadcasters having less money to do things as they do before, as the streaming giants kind of take over. So Netflix and Amazon just seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger and kind of swallow up more creators and kind of have a constant need for content. I think that might be a danger to public service broadcasters in the future and the budgets they have to offer. And I think we would miss those broadcasters when they're gone. But I think those broadcasters also have to move with the times. You know, BBC is starting to see the possibilities of their iPlayer. I don't know really why they haven't monetized the iPlayer and kind of, you know, used it as a global platform in the way that Netflix does. You know, they've got a great name, they've got a great brand. Why aren't they using their iPlayer as a way to kind of monetize content? You know, BBC films, you could buy them off the iPlayer. So I think that the kind of more traditional broadcasters are going to have to change how they think about things. They're going to have to change how they think about audiences, and they're going to have to think about how they develop themselves in this new world and what their strengths are as broadcasters themselves.
Amazing, incredible.
I think that's very valid, actually, and I mean, obviously, BritBox is one of the ways that, you know, certainly BBC and ITV have tried to reimagine. It was interesting they launched that in America before it actually came to the UK.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite interesting. But I think one of the things that maybe Luke was alluding towards as well, though, is that as technology and the way that technology enables things to be created and be published, are we going to see the potential of storytelling finding new avenues in perhaps like immersive storytelling, or like you said, non-linear formats that are, you know, built within apps and, you know, much more within that kind of like mobile communication sort of atmosphere, if you like, than the traditional bigger broadcasters, or even moving beyond the idea of even things like the platforms like Netflix and Amazon. You know, is it going to become something that's much more dynamic and much more immersive, and even to an extent, people can actually as a user interface themselves within that world? Do you see those sorts of things potentially coming forward?
Yeah, there's kind of several different parts to that question. I think people have been experimenting with that kind of more immersive form of storytelling for years, and Black Box tried to do it, didn't they, on Netflix? And I think that's been one of the ways that, you know, drama writers, quite a few of them have branched out into games as well. You know, that way of kind of telling stories where you can tell it kind of several different entry points and several different exit points. But I also think that audiences, you know, like to be taken on a ride, and I think quite often they like to feel that somebody else is in control. You know, that they're not creating the story, but they can sit back and enjoy somebody else's experience, and that they can kind of switch off and be entertained in a way. So I think there's always going to be kind of, you know, the people that kind of want that experience. I think there is always going to be a platform for doing that kind of stuff. But I also think there's going to be, you know, people that just love being told stories. I do think the technology means that we can tell different kinds of stories than we could before. At the moment, I'm just in talks with an agent about a series of 4 books, which are a YA set of books, young adult books. They're great stories, and I'd always thought, you know, wouldn't it be fantastic if there was the way to make them for film or TV? But because of how the story is told and the area in which it was told, I always thought that it was just going to be impossible. You know, some of the action happens underwater, you know, and people are talking to each other. And I just thought, you know, there's no way you could do that. How would you be able to do that? But in kind of doing all my research for the other piece that I'm working on with Lionsgate at the moment, the technology has caught up where you can do, you know, dry for wet shooting. You shoot in the studio, but you can make it look like things are happening underwater. So it feels like technology is catching up now to make different kinds of stories possible that we might have dismissed before. So that's quite exciting, you know, thinking that, you know, oh, actually, I can see a way that we can make this work now. And seeing how the studios are also playing around with backgrounds that are, you know, not built sets or, you know, scenery that's painted, but they're using screens in the background because the resolution is now so good that it looks so real that they can use that as a backdrop instead of having to go out and shoot something on location. All that's quite interesting. Motion capture, motion control has always been really interesting, thinking how you can use that in stories. So I think there are going to be ways to kind of bring you closer to the action and bring you closer to the experience and then immerse you in the story in a different way. Whether that's being actively involved in creating the story or whether you want to sit back and enjoy it, I think it would depend on what kind of person you are and what kind of entertainment experience you want.
Amazing. That kind of rolls really seamlessly into our last question we had, which was with the pandemic, how do you see the future and how do you see the both challenges and potentials of as we go into the future post-pandemic, but also currently from the situation we've all been in as an industry?
Yeah. I think the pandemic has been quite brutal for production. A lot of the community is freelance and quite a lot of the community is self-employed but working in production. So that's been quite brutal in terms of people's livelihoods. At the moment, production is still allowed to go ahead. And I think the film and TV industries have had some of the strictest COVID controls anywhere. You know, my sister's a nurse doing vaccinations, and, you know, we talk about kind of COVID safe scenarios all the time, and she's often quite amazed. You know, I had to update my training the other day, update my certificate the other day for my COVID safe working, you know, that says that I can go on a set and I'm safe to work on that set. And, you know, she's often quite amazed that it's so detailed and quite technical, and you know, it's very strict about where you can go, what you can do, how far apart you have to be, whether you do tests or not, whether you can have people remote viewing of rushes of things that are happening on set. You know, people are developing new technology to do that, where you can sit and watch what's going on a set from anywhere in the world. You know, previously you had to be there, you had to be in the video village watching what was going on screen. I don't think that's going to be necessary anymore. Which as an exec is quite interesting to me. You know, quite often I would have to be flying to all kinds of different places to go to the set to kind of see what was happening and be part of it. But now there might be times when I don't need to do that. I might still want to do that, but there might be times when I don't need to do that. And in COVID, trying to keep as many people that don't need to be in production on the production set as possible away, I think has really been quite useful. I think the things that are still shooting are perhaps different kinds of things that they might have been shooting before the pandemic, particularly in drama. So quite often in drama, if we want big historical period backgrounds, we might go and shoot them somewhere else. You know, we might go and shoot them in another country where construction is cheaper than it is in the UK. I think there's been much less international travel. I think there has been a bias towards continuing with shoots where they can happen in controllable places, in studio sets, rather than in lots of different locations. So that's made a difference to the kind of dramas that have continued. And there was also a big move to get the government to back insurance, because when the pandemic first started, all the insurers basically said, well, no, we're not going to cover that. And if you don't have insurance to do your shoot, you're not going to be able to go ahead, because if your lead actor gets sick and you have to abandon it, you know, that could roll on with people's availabilities. You might never finish that shoot. So, you know, the insurance was a massive thing. And I think there are lots of practices that people have adopted during COVID that are probably going to continue in the future. So things like, you know, not having everybody crammed in the set watching things in Video Village. I think that's going to stay, you know, being able to do that remote viewing everywhere. Having people traveling less. Having people, this is kind of also part of the move towards having greener production as well with Albert, you know, having things that are sustainable in production as well. So thinking about bringing your own water bottle onto the set rather than having lots of water bottles doled out every single day, you know, having your own, keeping your own. You do that in COVID. That's good for the planet as well. So there are some things that are kind of good for the environment as well that we're going to continue to. I'd like to think that there's going to come a point where we can go back to thinking about, you know, massive productions that can move all over the world. One of the things that I'm working on at the moment, we have very actively been looking about whether we might go and shoot it in New Zealand, because, you know, if we go over there and we quarantine, after that, the restrictions would be much less because their environment is much safer than ours is at the moment because they're more or less COVID free. So I think it's going to have an impact on where people choose to shoot in the world.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Claire. I think that's it, unless you have anything you'd like to add. It's an absolute pleasure chatting with you about the industry, about your career.
Thank you.
I actually got one brief question, which I'm just going to throw in just because I think, and that is just, do you think within the way in which people can access getting into the industry, have you seen over the past number of years that getting better for, people from diverse backgrounds in terms of gender equality, etc.? Do you think it is better now in terms of more accessibility for people to actually get into the industry, or do you think it's stagnating?
I think it's better in that people are much more aware of the choices that they make. I remember having conversations with people at one of the companies that I was working with about, how and where we chose to look for people that might, apply for a job, or, where we might look for candidates. And I remember at that particular time, somebody turning around and saying to me, well, I thought we'd just choose the best person for the job. And I said, yes, but it depends where you're looking for the people that come to do the interview before you choose who's the best person for the job. If it's, all the sons and daughters of people that work in the company that are kind of, want to get into the industry, that's a very small pool of talent. But if we're advertising it in different places, in different parts of the country, spreading your net wider, then that will make a real difference to who comes in. I think we need a real mix of experience.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to my own experience of, people like us don't work in TV. I remember at the time I was growing up on Merseyside. Brookside was on TV and Boys from the Black Stuff had just been on TV. And I remember looking at those two things and deciding that my dad must be completely wrong, because if there was nobody like me working in TV, then how did those two programs get made? I think there is a big thing about, if you can see it, you can be it. Yeah. And I think we do need to we need to think about experiences more widely, be open to different kinds of ideas and different kinds of stories. I think it's really interesting that in one country where a film body, a film council for that country, decided that they were going to give their funding equally to male directors and female directors. What was really interesting, there was that in the following years when those films were made, the films from female directors were getting more awards elsewhere because they were telling stories that nobody had seen before and that felt different and new and unusual. They were standing out in the market in a different way. But that took people to make a difference, to say, actually, we're going to treat this in a different way. We're going to look at doing this in a different way. I think now there are many more training opportunities and schemes that look for people from a diverse range of background. And then there's awareness of that in a way that there hasn't been before. I think the industry does change very, very slowly, but I think it is starting to happen. Thank God, not before time.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Claire, for joining us today on the podcast. Please like and subscribe OSBD and follow us on YouTube, on our website. If you're listening on the audio podcast, please follow us and give us a review, and just let us know that you're liking it and let us know if there's anything we can do. Thank you, Claire, once again. Is there anywhere we can follow you to keep up to with your work?
I don't have my website at the moment, so I have chosen not to spend my money on that and chosen to spend my money on development. I'm always on Twitter. I have things in the press regularly, and we're actually just going to press the trade press today with an announcement about one of the dramas that I'm working on. That's going to be on Deadline later today and in The Guardian tomorrow.
Brilliant.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Claire.
Thanks, Claire.
And see you all next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.